Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to another video on my channel. Today I'm doing something very different. Normally I'm either vlogging or making all these cinematic videos if you've been following me on social media, but today I'm actually going to be doing my first tutorial to help you guys make better videos. And the topic I wanted to cover today is FPS, as in frames per second. Basically, in short, what this means is the amount of frames in a video per second. Self-explanatory. So 24 frames per second, you're going to have 24 shots in 1 second and then compiled together. That's your video, and the same for 24, 30, and 60. Now, I guess where I would want to start with the FPS, this video, for example, is being filmed at 30 FPS. So what that allows for is a lot of light to come into the shot, because when you have 30 frames per second, it tends to be on the slower side, but I mean in reality it's super quick. But for demonstration, 30 frames, and then if you had 60 frames in a shot, you'd be very rapid, like, and so when you have more light, and so when that shutter moves more slowly at 30 frames, it lets more light in, allowing for my shot to be brighter. 60 frames per second, since it's faster, it would normally result in a darker shot indoors or in low lit environments outside during the sunny day. It doesn't make a difference. We'll start, I think the 3 frames we're gonna work with are 24, 30, and 60, because those are the ones that I primarily use and I'm most familiar with. Starting with 24, this is the frame rate that you see every movie in theaters pretty much ever. This is like the standard, like golden standard for any kind of film. It gives it that classic film look, cinematic, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to use my trusty GoPro here to help demonstrate FPS. This is a camera that I've been using for years before I got my A6000 that I'm filming on now. All GoPros were all I used. Yeah, and they did the job for a really long time, and I still use them today. Okay, so starting with 24, I'm just using my GoPro as an example, but pretty much any camera these days is what's going to have the frame rate options. So we'll go with resolution 1080, frame rates 24. Shutter, I want it at pretty much 148. That's going to be the closest to what we get. You always want your shutter to be double what you're filming with. So for 24 frames per second, I want my shutter to be at 150th, but 148th is the closest we can get. So now I have the camera set up in 24 frames per second, and I'm going to switch to the GoPro here. Alright, so what you're seeing right now is the GoPro at 24 frames per second. It's more susceptible to movements. If you're filming handheld, handshakes are going to be a bit more noticeable. But like I said, you get that added benefit of being able to film within low light. But 24 frames is really good for your cinematics and that classic kind of film look. It's like the FPS. That's what I'm just gonna call it, like, quote unquote, the FPS. Okay, so what you saw there was the 24 FPS, and back to what I said earlier, we're moving on to 30 now. This video is filmed on 30 frames per second. This is what I prefer, 30 over 24. I don't know why. I think it's like that tad bit of extra smoothness. I need more practice with 24, because a lot of the stuff I film in 24 just, to me, doesn't look that great. Alright, so moving to 30 frames per second here. If I scroll down, see, we're gonna see shutter. I'm gonna go for 160. Like I said, you want to have that double shutter speed for whatever frame rate you're using. And so I'm gonna switch back to the GoPro here now. Okay, and this is at 30 frames per second. You may not be able to notice too much of a difference between this and the 24 frames. It should be just a bit smoother. This is for anything not in slow motion. If you want to film at just the regular 100% speed, no changes to that, then this is really the frame rate that you're going to want to go for. If you try to slow down 30 or 24 frames per second, it's going to kind of get this robotic look, just simply because there's not enough frames to compensate for the slowdown. And so when you put it in slow motion, so if you were to try to put 30 in slow motion, it would just kind of like almost move like it's really tight. It doesn't look smooth and it does not flow. So yeah, that would be the 30 frames per second. All right, now moving on again, finally to the last one I'm going to talk about today, which is 60 frames. All right, now what you're seeing is 60 frames on the GoPro here. This is pretty much the highest frame rate I can use right now. I'd prefer 120 for the 1080 resolution, but unfortunately my camera here does not support 120 at 1080. It only supports up to 60 frames. Generally, your higher end cameras are going to supply that 120. But this is the frames per second I'd use to film any sort of slow motion, any fast moving activity. I use this a lot in my surf edits. I'll pull up a clip here. Yeah, what you see is the slowed down at 50%. And so what you get is that nice smooth, it looks like it flows. It's because you have enough frames to compensate for the slow motion. Okay, so what you just saw there is 60 frames per second. That's anything I use if I want to put something in slow motion or fast moving activity. Typically, if you were riding around in a car and you're filming outside, I like to use 60 because it just looks a little less blurred. But I guess if you wanted to go for that sort of blurred effect, 30 FPS would do you just fine. Don't recommend using 60 FPS in lower light. Like I said before, it's going to make your images darker and just not look as good. Yeah, that 30 frames is gonna let in more light. That pretty much covers the basics of frame rate. I think, now I know a lot of people these days filming on their phones, iPhones, Samsungs, whatever. But even phones have come so far. I don't film on my phone personally just because I never have enough space for that. But what a lot of people don't know is I've realized is that even your phone can have like good camera settings. So if you were to go to settings here, let's see, scroll down to your photos and camera, and you can go to record video. You'll see right here, video and slow-mo video. iPhones support all these different frames per second. You get 1080 at 30 for your standard film, and even at 1080 you can get 60 FPS. So don't think you have to have the fanciest camera to worry about FPS, because even something as simple as your iPhone can get it these days. Just to let you know that your phone has that option. Same for slow motion, you can record it down to 120 frames per second. This is what the frames per second I was talking about earlier. It's where you can slow it down even further than 60 frames. So 60 frames, the max slow motion you can have is 50%, but with 120 you can slow it all the way down to 25%, for example. But yeah, the video kind of went on a bit longer than I expected, but for the most part that covers all the bases FPS wise. I hope this made sense. This is my first real technical tutorial video. Just make sure that, okay, just make sure we're zoomed out. This is my first technical tutorial video, so bear with me. I'm sure they'll get better in the future as I practice this. If you guys have any questions on more about frame rate, or if you have any ideas for how I can improve these tutorial videos, please leave them in the comments below. I do read and respond to all my comments, and everyone who comments I greatly appreciate. And but yeah, this is all for this tutorial, and until next time, see you guys later. Peace.